Okay, that today was the 5th yard site of Chana ben Yaakov Alevi, his name is Herbert Schwartz, who 5 years ago passed away and left his house for the shul on Elm. And that block, his mamash exactly 5 years ago he passed away, and that day his wife told Mendel that they're donating the house to the shul, which actually made this place happen. Obviously the Eibishter made it happen, the Rebbe made it happen, but there was so therefore the learning today and now is in his merit in the Shom Shev and Aliyah Chana ben Yaakov Alevi. Okay, and you should help out in continuing with the shul. Should get us some more people. Not to die and donate the house, but while they're alive, they should donate the house to the shul. Okay, we were learning yesterday in the Din Mabasa v'Cholav that you have, within 24 hours, is called a fresh taste. So therefore, if you, let's say you have a meat pot that was used that day, within 24 hours to cook meat, and then somebody cooked milk in that same pot, so the milk is treif, because like we learned the other day, you count as far as how much meat there is, the whole perimeter and everything, the whole pot, not the empty space, but the actual pot. And rarely, like we learned yesterday, rarely are you going to have 60 times the amount to make it kosher. So in that case, the meat is treif, the milk is treif, the pot is definitely treif, and everything has to be kosher, you can't eat it. What happens if the pot wasn't used for 24 hours? Then we learned it's a blemished taste. So then, if somebody has a halachic meat pot that wasn't used for 24 hours, and they cooked milk in it, so again, the milk is kosher, but because there's only a blemished taste of meat in it, and that doesn't matter, and the pot, though, you need to cover, to kasher. But here you have another interesting thing. What happens if somebody took a meat pot that was used within 24 hours, and they cooked milk in it, willingly, so to speak, they transgressed a biblical mitzvah of cooking meat and milk together. Because the taste of the meat in the pot, because it's within 24 hours, we learned the other day, a few days ago when we started, you're not allowed to cook meat and milk, you're not allowed to eat meat and milk, and you're not allowed to benefit from meat and milk, if it's biblical meat and milk. So therefore, if somebody takes a pot that was used within 24 hours of meat, and you cook dairy in it, not only is the milk treif and the pot's treif, but you also transgress a biblical commandment of cooking meat and milk together. If the pot wasn't used for 24 hours, then obviously you didn't transgress anything because you're not cooking meat and milk together. But I'll give you an example. Somebody called me today. I'm trying to think now. Before I had it in mind, I forgot what they... this was really a different case. They have grates on the stove. They have one side dairy and one side meat. Okay? And the new housekeeper came and washed them together and mixed up the meat one and the milk one. So she put the meat grates on the milk side and the milk grates on the meat side. Okay? So now, and she started cooking on now, which was the milk grates, because it was supposed to be the meat grates, but it was a mistake. And she started cooking halachic meat in a pot.
The housekeeper did?
No, the housekeeper didn't cook. If she would cook meat, it would be treif. But the woman didn't know. She realized later that she changed the grates. But over there's another din which is very important in Bas. So I asked if anything spilled. Did anything spill over on the pot onto the grate? Because the din is the only way with liquid that one thing becomes absorbed from the next is only with liquid. For instance, if you're cooking meat here and milk here, and the pots are touching, but there's no water, there's no wetness, there's no moisture between the two pots, it doesn't transmit from pot A to pot B without liquid. So therefore, if you're cooking on a stove It's all dry at the bottom. Okay? So even though it's a milk grate, and you're cooking a pot that has meat in it, but the bottom line is between the grate, which is dairy, and the pot, which is meat, there's no liquid. If there's no liquid, it can't transfer from one to the next, so it's not a problem. Now, the problem would be if it spilled over, and now at the bottom of the pot, on the grate, you have meat, then you're going to have a big problem. Then you have a lot of things to kasher. But that's...
If that's the case, how come then the counter, we're concerned, let's say it's dry, nothing touches, but then you don't put something on the counter, that's questionable if the counter is hot, if it's dry.
If somebody puts, let's say you have a non-kosher counter, okay? You go to Airbnbs or whatever, it's non-kosher counter. So yesterday we were discussing that when that person asked me the question, but the pearl wasn't used for 24 hours. Because the Airbnb, nobody was there for 24 hours, so then again, it's blemished, so it's not a problem. But what happens if you have a treifa counter that was used that day for treif? Because it's more than 24 hours, again, it's not an issue. But what happens if you have a counter, this counter was used for meat that day, okay? But it's dry. And you put down a hot milk pot on that counter, but again, the pot's dry at the bottom. So there's no liquid to transmit from the counter to the pot or from the pot to the counter. So then it's not an issue. No.
It's always an issue.
Only if there's water. Now you don't do it. You don't do it because what happens if there is water? Well, you have to be careful. But if somebody did it, then it's not an issue because there's no liquid in between them.
How about if you turn on the stove and let the grates get...
Okay, so what does she have to do anyway in that case with the grates? She should turn on the fire and let it get very, very hot.
You should put it in the oven.
Or you could put it into the oven and get it very hot that way. Either way, but you have to get it hot.
The oven has to be self-cleaning at high temperature.
You don't need, in this case, you wouldn't need self-cleaning, and that's not for now. As we progress in Basar Echol, we'll learn.
So that's for Pesach.
That's Pesach, that's... Okay, meat and milk from one side is stricter than treif and kosher, and in the one or two respects, it's more lenient. What's called an halacha hetera bola, absorbed was kosher, permissible versus treif, which is absorbed, not kosher. Well, we'll get there. Okay, now, by the way, that's only, you can't take lechatchila, a pot that was a meat pot, not used for 24 hours, and cook milk in it. You can't. It's only after the fact that by mistake you cooked milk in a meat pot, so then you have that issue. But otherwise, you shouldn't do it. You're not allowed to do it. That's why you have to kasher the pot. Because we learned the other day, if you can have one pot and use it for meat, and then wait 24 hours and use it for milk, and then you wait 24 hours and use it for meat, and 24, you could do that technically, but you're not allowed to, because, rabbinically you're not allowed to do it, because you might forget, and it will be within 24 hours, and you'll have a big problem. What?
So the only reason why it would be a problem to use the same stove or the same counters is because in a situation it might be liquid. Is that the only reason why?
Okay. You have I was going to wait for later, but it's brought up now. Let's talk about it. You have a grate on the stove. Let's say a gas stove, okay? The fire coming out the grate, correct? Now, let's say some milk spills over it, onto the grate, but the fire is on. Does that burn up the dairy immediately? Huh?
Like kashes it on the spot?
The pashtus, there's a logic to say in halacha that it burnt it up, lechatchila. Right? And especially it's different because when it absorbed the milk, it was nothing not kosher. Milk is not treif. So he said, hetera bola. It absorbed.
If it was something treif, based on the fact that without liquid you can't transmit.
So the question is, if it burnt it up right away, then the question is, I'll give you an example. Gas grates. Okay? Gas grates, if you want to kasher them, do you have to make them red hot? Or is what's called liben kal that we learned about by Pesach is enough? Many shittas in halacha hold that liben kal is enough. Why? Huh? That it gets very hot. The bottom line, if you touch it or you put a straw on the other end, it'll turn black. Or you touch it, it depends if there's rust or not. But you touch it, you're going to have to take your hand back. That's called liben kal. So for instance, the Mishnah Berurah holds, even for Pesach, if you want to kasher a gas grate, you just turn it out and make it hot. That's it. The Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch says that a chatzuva, which is, in Yiddish it's called a dreifus, which is a tripod, but it's actually a grate that sits on the fire. The Alter Rebbe says, sarach libun, okay, you need libun, and the Rebbe Rashab writes that he means libun gomer. So the Alter Rebbe is machmer that it needs libun gomer, even for Pesach especially. Does that mean a whole year the Alter Rebbe is machmer? It's all up in the air. Some poskim hold Pesach restrictive, some Pesach. But
based on this, if there's no liquid transmitting it, or even if it's fake, if it's not fake,
but that's only b'di'evid. Just again in Ben Yoimei, if it's not used for 24 hours, only b'di'evid. You can't use a fleshig pot that wasn't used for 24 hours and cook milk in it.
Here, the only reason because it's chopped with like liquid is that
correct.
So nevertheless, we don't use it.
You don't do it because maybe there will be liquid.
Is there a problem using melting pot on a fleshy stove?
You shouldn't, because it might spill over.
But as long as it doesn't spill over.
Yeah, but how do you know it's not going to spill over? Are you a Navi?
If it spills over, it's going to be...
If it spills over, it's going to be a problem.
If it spills over and you have some meat on the grate, then it's a...
Then for sure you'll have a problem.
Is it cooking?
Let me tell you something. There's an expression, I teach it to, my wife teaches it to the girls, I teach it to the boys and girls. A kitchen that's not clean is assumed to be treif. It's a sharp statement, but it's realistically, it's true. Because if a kitchen is not clean, inevitably, again, you know how many times I get a shaila? By mistake, somebody put a part of a food, but a milchik tray in a fleshik oven. Okay? Now, if the oven is clean, there's no issue. Because again, there's no liquid. But if the oven is dirty, and you have meat baked onto the grate, okay? That's still fleshik, right? And now you put a milchik pan on top of a grate that's dirty with meat.
There's no liquid.
So what? But there's substantial meat. It's going to make everything treif. So therefore, when people ask a shaila, I mean, every Rav does this. The first question the Rav asks, is the oven clean? And you should hear the answers I get. It's unbelievable. Well, a little clean. So clean, whatever. A little clean means dirty. No, but it depends. You can have a kitchen that you have, you know what happens a lot of times? A person, people don't think, right? We know that people don't think. You're busy stirring chicken soup, yeah? And the same spoon, which is dirty with chicken on it, yeah? All of a sudden you mix a part of a dish, or you mix a milchik dish, it's on the same fire, you're cooking for Shabbos, yeah? So you're cooking meat, and you're cooking, I don't know, fish, whatever. And you take the spoon, and instead of, you don't clean it. So you take a mamish fleshika spoon, so then you have to know, is it nullified in 60, is it bottle b'shishim, not nullified b'shishim?
If there's a spoon, the one that the kind of thing that you put the spoon on the counter,
No?
the spoon happens to have
You mean a ladle?
milk in it.
You're talking about a ladle?
No, he's talking
Yeah, the one that
No,
holds
he's
this.
talking about-
You serve soup with it?
No,
like a
no.
holder. Like
A holder.
You put instead of putting it on the counter, you put it on something like
No.
a bigger spoon.
Yeah.
If that was used for a milking thing, and you put a spoon that was,
If it was dirty,
it's a problem.
you're going to have a problem, yeah. People need to make, Kedusha is cleanliness. Holiness is cleanliness, especially in the kitchen. I'm not joking. A kitchen where it's not, as they say in Yiddish, balabatish, it's not clean, then you're going to have infinitely more shilas of mamish tray for things than if it would be a clean oven, a clean sink, and a clean stove.
In language we say shit happens.
Yeah.